Hello and welcome. How are you? It's Friday. You can tell by all the chainsaws. We're going to walk to the store to buy our pumpkins. And since we're walking, we might as well do another talk about GM tips. How y'all doing today? Thank you for joining me on this walk. Hopefully we'll see some spookies. It's Friday, and it's time to talk about adventure design for my GM tips that I was told I have to give. I don't know why people want to give GM tips. What the hell do I know? But okay. Adventure design. Whether you're young or young at heart, whether you're just starting and you've never ever done this before, or you've been doing this forever, it's always nice to just get a breath of fresh air and refresh on the ideas of adventure building, adventure design. What is the story I want my adventure to tell? When we were talking about haunted houses earlier, we explored the idea that the haunted house is a character in the story. And you could say the same thing about the dungeon or the adventure or whatever you want to call it. It is a character in the story. It has its wants, it has its needs, it has its fears, it has its job, it has the story it wants to tell. The player characters, as they go through the adventure, are fulfilling the story of the dungeon, right? It's an interesting concept. I don't know if anybody's really ever explored it before, but it does kind of make sense. I mean, not that like the dungeon's going to get up and walk around and try on a t-shirt or whatever, but it does have a story to tell. And that story can be paramountly important to your campaign, or just a one-shot that you're using to waste some time. Now, you're going to hear a lot of different people give you a lot of different ideas about dungeons and adventures and dungeon building and adventure building, how big, how little, mythical underground, mega dungeons. Now, one thing you should probably remember is that your adventure should kind of make sense. As much as anything in this hobby makes sense, but not like, where you need to meticulously explain how the toilets work, but more like just cohesive. Like if I'm running a group of adventurers through Temple of the Snake God, they're probably going to expect snakes, right? I mean, it's literally on the cover, Temple of the Snake Gods. So if I run them through Temple of the Snake God and we don't encounter a single snake, well, that doesn't make sense. Where's the snake god? All we've run into are goblins and slimes. So when I say it needs to make sense, that's what I mean. Like, it should be thematically on point. You can, mess it up with a few random shit, because that's just a qualified aspect of the adventure, that there's always some random stuff, but generally it should make some kind of sense. The monsters, the encounters, the needs and wants of the adventure should be cohesive. All right, so thankfully, after 50 years, you have a plethora, I got to use plethora in a sentence, a plethora of pre-generated adventures out there. You would never, ever, 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 oh, here's that cool graveyard again. This might be the best lawn I've seen this year. It is just so charming. A plethora of pre-published adventures. Anything you could think of has been published, so your work's done. And in fact, so many of them repeat similar themes that you could run entire campaigns by just fitting the ones that have similar themes together in some haphazard method. And again, never have to do any work. Just come with a semi-cohesive storyline that connects them all together. So that's something to remember, is the work's been done, all right? You can design your own if you want, but it's more fun to take the ones that are already out there and just sort of mash them together, Lego them together, make new interesting things out of the pre-published ones. Take the Temple of the Snake King, and then take the Dungeon of the Snake Lord, and then take White Serpent Mountain. None of those exist as far as I know. and mash them together to make your take on a snake-themed adventure. Now, if you do want to design your own, again, cohesive theme. What is its wants? What is its needs? What do I have to tell? What is its job? And you hear a lot of us talk about, when we talk about the dungeon's job, the 5-room dungeon. The idea that everything you need a dungeon can be done in 5 encounters, right? Now you can mix and match these any way you want. Weather's changing, I'm getting a headache. This one's okay. But basically, there's 5 things you're gonna run into pretty much every adventure, is the general idea. It's been 90% proven accurate, but there's always room for something new and different. So you're always gonna have at least one baby encounter to set the stakes, right? So if we're using our fictional snake temple that we're designing here, within the first 2 beats, the first 2 rooms, you want to have some snake related encounter. Not devastating, unless the dice go bad, but just enough to establish that there are snake themed monsters in here. And these are the rules that the snake themed monsters are following, right? If they bite you, there's poison, blah, blah, blah. All right, so you've set the theme. So you usually want to start with that. You don't have to, but you'll find 8 out of 10 adventures do start with a baby encounter. Then you're going to want a non-fight, something that's either a skill test or a role-playing test. So those 2 are interchangeable, and even though we count them as separate on the list, this is a random hook with a random hand hanging from it. It's like they started but then just never finished. It's like, this is it, I'm done, that's my Halloween decorations. But basically, they're flippy floppy. It's basically a chance for them to do dice rolling and play around with what their characters have in a non-combat situation. So you're gonna want a skill test, right? Disarming a trap is an obvious one. Figuring something out that will use one or more of the player's skills or classes. So in our snake-themed room, there's a skeleton of a Great Dane. You're gonna have maybe a poison trap or some kind of weird combination that requires you pointing all the snake statues in one specific way. A skill test of some kind. Maybe they have to swing across ropes, but those ropes are really vipers. I don't know. Something vaguely snake themed. Then you want a role-playing test where they can just stretch out their characters, just really get into, why am I here? What am I doing? And they could be talking to an NPC, talking to each other, interacting with the dungeon in a more RPG diplomacy way versus combat way. So, maybe bribing guards or listening to guards, disguising yourself as the snake cultist and blending in with the snake cultists so you can find out what the snake cultists are up to and whatever the MacGuffin was that got you to the dungeon. Oh, we got to go to the temple of the snake god because they've kidnapped Princess NPC, and if we don't recover Princess MacGuffin by midnight, they're sacrificing her to the snake god. All right, well, these cultists, they know where she is. So we're gonna RPG encounter, follow them around, blend in with them, ask them questions, and hopefully figure out where Princess MacGuffin is, all right? So that's the third, that's the one. Then you want another fight. Or this one should be tougher than the previous fight, but still not super deadly. Right? Just enough that you could wound them, make them use up resources, but unless the dice don't go their way, probably not going to see any deaths. Probably see some wounds, maybe somebody dropped to 0, but this is still something within their wheelhouse. But now, we've built up the threat, we've got them excited. Random statue of a swan. All right? Then you want the big fight. So now you're fighting the head cultist of the snake, giant snake guy, whatever. The big bad, as we call it. or the mid-level boss. Now this is one where they have to use up more resources if they haven't already used them all up, but they're really gonna have to think, and this is really gonna clobber them. Like, this guy could take out one or more of the characters. And then once that's all done, your final room is the reward. Not to say the other things you fought don't have stuff, but the big reward is usually the final part of the 5 rooms. So in our case, it might be some more treasure, but most importantly, if we follow the story of the dungeon and we get to room 5, we will have rescued Princess MacGuffin before she's sacrificed to the snake god. And then you have the ending, the seldom talked about 6th room in the 5-room dungeon, the twist. Turns out Princess MacGuffin was in league with the snake god. What? Bum, bum, bum. See you next week, right? So that's the 5-room dungeon idea. And you can use that as one set dungeon, or you can just take that idea and repeat it over and over and over again to build your big dungeon. Your 5-room dungeon becomes a 10-room dungeon, 15-room dungeon, 20-room dungeon, 100-room dungeon, 10,000-room dungeon. But it doesn't matter how many rooms, they just all kind of tend to follow this script. Baby fight, big fight, super big fight, skill test, role-playing test, other stuff. Oh my God, look at that giant spider. All right, this one wins. No, the other one still wins, but this one is definitely taking the most of the I bought my stuff. But there's no cohesive theme. It's just random stuff they got at, Party City. It's just random giant skeleton, random giant dog, random jack, random skeleton, giant frightening spider. That's nightmare fuel. Another 3 giant thingies. It's awesome, they're amazing, but there's no cohesive theme. I would rather see a cohesive theme. I also don't get the giant monster thing. Why is that inherently more scary than a normal sized pumpkin guy? This one's cool. So yeah, A+, but also there's no cohesive theme. Okay, but see, there you go, just random encounter. That encounter doesn't make sense. So you can always have the random encounter in there. And you're gonna find, if you buy pre-purchase adventures, that script tends to run true. Not always in that order, but you're gonna tend to always encounter baby fight, big fight, trap, role-playing, reward, rinse and repeat. And you can mix it up any way you want. Now I have broken that down even further to the idea that really there's only 1 or 2 or 3 things that need to happen every adventure, every setting, every game, in order to move the game along. And they don't have to happen in any order. They don't even have to happen the way you planned for them to happen. They just have to happen, right? So again, this is going back to the idea of the MacGuffin and the idea that you have the ability to change things in the adventure if the party doesn't do what you thought they were going to do. Because all too often, pre-printed adventures and handwritten adventures are very linear, and we don't really think, especially with pre-printed adventures, what do we do if? What do I do if in the temple of the snake god, the party figure out a way to block up the water source and flood the temple of the snake god? There's nothing in here. But they've come up with a really clever idea, so I can't tell them no. If they can figure it out and do it, then they should be able to do it, right? But there's nothing in the adventure about that. So this is where you get to give yourself permission to mess up, make mistakes, change things. As long as the goal of the dungeon is achieved, you could rewrite the story of the dungeon based upon how your characters interact with the dungeon, all right? Maybe to continue to using our snake temple theme and continue to use the story of the snake temple thing, we need to get Princess MacGuffin either the party does something directly or indirectly to change the script. All right? They make a lot of noise, they fail a role-playing test, they set off a trap, one of them dies, they discover a secret door, they do something completely off script, like flood the dungeon, or set it on fire, or just not go. Fuck Princess MacGuffin, let's go to Disneyland. Well, every one of those but the last one, you can adapt, all right? So the linear says Princess MacGuffin is the final thing. But because they've made noise, because the monsters are now aware of them, the script has changed, the monsters can move around. They can change locations. They could leave. They have access to all the same resources that the players have access, plus they have home field advantage. Maybe there's a way out, you know, through a smokestack or something. Maybe they sacrifice a couple of the cultists, giving head cultist and Princess MacGuffin a chance to escape. Maybe they move up the timetable, right? Whatever it is you have to retrieve has changed. Or maybe they just kill Princess MacGuffin right there, and then you have to change the MacGuffin. Maybe the players kill Princess MacGuffin. Then you've got to change things, right? But within that 5-room dungeon, within that scenario, there's certain things that kind of have to happen, right? You kind of have to have that final, let's rescue Princess MacGuffin. It's the reason why we're here, unless they say, fuck Princess MacGuffin, let's go to Disneyland. But as long as they're staying within the script, you can change up the script, right? You can take these multiple snake-themed dungeons that you found and mashed together and take them apart and put them back together as need be in order to facilitate the changes that the players have made. By their own actions or this inactions, they can't go this way anymore. So I can move whatever was here over to here if I think it's really important, or if I don't think it's important, I can ignore it. It's just they never know what was in that room because they didn't go there and whatever. Unless there's that one party that has to search every square inch of the dungeon. But otherwise, and I assure you they exist. But otherwise, you know, okay, they didn't go to room 5. We'll never have to see room 5. They have no instance in room 5. Room 5, you get thrown away. You have nothing really to do with the story. But we definitely gotta resolve the MacGuffin. But we're doing things in a weird way. So go ahead, move things around. You have these resources. You've gone and you've read through the adventure. You've added your own little flavor to the adventure to make that adventure uniquely yours. And now you're running with it. You're improvising because they're doing something you didn't have planned, or they've come up with a much better idea, or you've come up with a much better idea. Right? Again, you've got 50 years of pre-printed stuff to work with. You could find half a dozen published adventures all built around snake theme, and then just mash them together. Take this one from this one, take this room from this one, and mash, that's what I do, and mash them together to present your version of snake themed adventure, or whatever. I'm just using snakes cause. Okay, what if they do something that's completely off the rails, right? It's a slim chance, but it happens. What if they decide, fuck Princess MacGuffin, we're going someplace else? Well, you have the innately built-in threat that if they do not rescue Princess MacGuffin by midnight, Princess MacGuffin gets sacrificed to the snake god, thus making the snake god way more powerful when they encounter them a second time, right? Unless, of course, we're using the twist ending where Princess MacGuffin is actually in on it, right? So now Princess MacGuffin's dead. That's the worst possible scenario. But what comes out of that? One, they've led to a future scenario where they have to now deal with a much more powerful snake god. Two, the king's probably upset that you didn't rescue his daughter. The friends and families of Princess MacGuffin are upset that you didn't rescue his daughter. and they might, want to punish you. You might get a reputation of being jackasses because you didn't rescue Princess MacGuffin, and now we've got to deal with that. Maybe you've got to do something to prove you're worthy by doing another quest for the king that's doubly hard. Maybe now that you failed to save Princess MacGuffin, you need to now go get the MacGuffin weapon of legend to defeat the now much more powerful snake god because you fucked up the first time. And every time they just say, no, fuck that, well, that just increases the amount of energy the king's going to invest in going after them. Now the heroes are becoming the bad guys. They're getting a reputation of being jerks. No one's going to hire them if you just take the money and run. You didn't rescue Princess MacGuffin, why should I hire you? I can't trust you. So that's the immediate and long-term outcome. There's other outcomes. Maybe Princess MacGuffin rescues herself. Maybe Princess MacGuffin was in it with the bad guys and her plan's ruined because you didn't rescue her. Maybe another adventuring group is hired just in case. When the king finds out you didn't succeed, he sends in NPC adventuring company and they succeed, and now they've got their reputation and they're now in a position to be more powerful than you, and you've got to deal with that. I mean, there's nothing saying they can't follow through with the adventure, but there should be consequences if they choose to do something else. Right? And we can discuss that more later, but basically, yeah. All right, so there's these steps that they have to take, OGGM, to get to the dungeon, and they're not doing them in order, or they're doing something that the mission, it doesn't explain. You remember my story about the non-existent blacksmith, right? Where I was running an adventure and somehow they got it in mind that there was a blacksmith and the blacksmith had something to do with the plot. There was no blacksmith. I never mentioned blacksmith. I don't know where they got the idea that there was a blacksmith, but they got it in their heads and they wanted to pursue it. Now, I could have dissuaded them and said, no, guys, there's no blacksmith. I don't know where you got this idea. Or I could have said, okay, I'll just add an NPC blacksmith and, maybe he actually does know the thing they're looking for, or maybe it's a red herring. I don't know. But they're really fascinated with this blacksmith. Why not just spend 5 extra seconds and throw in a random blacksmith with a random name? And his name is, Fire Chief Bushman or whatever, because those are the first 2 things I saw. So now they're going to take all the questions that they should have taken to the NPC that would have led them to Princess MacGuffin in the dungeon and take them to the blacksmith. So A, I just make the blacksmith the NPC who knows the answers, or B, the blacksmith is a red herring and I can use him to tell them all sorts of stuff because it turns out he doesn't know anything. He's just a blacksmith. There's always ways to get them back on track, sort of. As long as the MacGuffin is resolved in some form, it doesn't really matter how they get there, as long as they get there. Whether they follow it linearly, whether they just sort of hodgepodge, whether they do something completely unplanned for, you've got to be ready. Because you never know. You're dealing with living people, not computer people. You don't know what they're going to do. You know what you hope they're going to do. You've got ideas based upon what you think they're going to do, but you don't know. So it's okay to move things around. It's okay to change things. It's okay to rewrite the script in your head. They've got to get the magic axe to kill the snake god. Magic axe is over there. They never went over there. There's nothing saying I can't move the magic axe. As long as that is facilitated, doesn't really matter. Right? They feel like they resolved the story of that adventure. They feel like they resolved the story of that 5-room dungeon. They feel like they were important and they moved the story along. Maybe it's the story that's actually written in the module. Maybe it's a brand new story and you're just winging it and pushing things together, right? I mean, as long as it's still snake themed and we've got all these snake themed adventures that we downloaded, we can still run with it, right? We've got plenty of snake themed things we can do that they eventually still have to deal with some manifestation of the resolution of whatever the snake god wanted in the first place. And maybe Princess MacGuffin's dead, maybe she's alive, maybe she's in on it, doesn't matter. They've had fun, you've had fun. As long as you've had fun and they've had fun, that's all that matters. And I don't care what anybody else says otherwise. It's your game. Do what's the most fun for you and your players. And don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to me or anybody else. Just have a good time.